After finishing his report to the courtroom, Sheffield coroner Henry Badger frowned, before nodding to the jury and stepping down. Then the first witness was called, Harriet Ward. On Saturday the 24th of February 1855, young Harriet was sitting by the fire in the back room of the new property. Despite some hard times, she was really thankful for how things were turning out. She had been widowed a few years ago, and her husband died, leaving her to struggle financially. But a family from the Church of Latter-day Saints took pity on the young widow, and when they moved into a new property with a ground floor shop at the start of February, they took Harriet with them, renting out a room to her. Harriet was very happy with this new arrangement, and everyone got on well during the day, but at night the mood of the house completely changed, and Harriet feared it was the secret that she was hiding from John and his wife, the couple that had taken her in, that had added to the problems. It had just gone midnight when Harriet heard John call her name. He asked her to go down the stairs into the basement where the kitchen was, and to make sure the range was out before bed and that there was some kindling nearby ready to light it again in the morning. Harriet said this wouldn't be any trouble, and she opened the brown wooden door and made her way down the wooden staircase, down to the stone flagged kitchen below. All was quiet. Suddenly there was a loud scream that echoed through the house, and the Favels rushed downstairs to find Harriet leaning against the table, her features rigid and her eyes fixed upon the dark far corner of the room. The cellar window let in some moonlight, but it wasn't enough to light the room. The kitchen was almost in total darkness. Harriet was there, pointing and screaming over and over that a ghost was in the corner. The Favels told her that they could see nothing, but Harriet fainted. John and his wife and her sister all looked at each other, and then down at Harriet. "Maybe we should call a doctor. She might be losing reality," John said, as they carried her back up the stairs and sat her in an armchair. A few moments later, as she recovered, she noticed the look on their faces. So she described the apparition to them as a grim-featured old woman wearing a long white nightgown and a full-bordered cap, and she was leaning on the mantel with her elbows, with her head resting on one hand. It was true, immediately on moving into the new building on Campo Lane in Sheffield, the Favels were disturbed during the night by strange sounds in the basement. John and his wife had explained away everything that they'd come across, but this was unsettling. So they sent Harriet to bed and said she would feel better in the morning, and told each other it was just the effects of the imagination. But over the next 24 hours, young Harriet reported seeing the apparition 5 times while awake and in her dreams. She told John that in one vivid dream the old woman in white led her to a purse of gold buried under the flagstones in the cellar floor. Over the course of the week, the occupants grew so fearful that none of them would venture downstairs into the cellar kitchen after dark. And from here, things gradually got worse. At Wednesday morning at 7 a.m, John was opening the shop, when he heard a noise. He listened for a moment. It sounded like his neighbour taking the wooden shutters down. But as he opened the door and walked outside, he found the street was empty. Shrugging to himself, he turned to go back inside. But as he did, he looked down to the cellar kitchen window, and what he saw stopped him dead. He saw a pale woman put her face close to the window looking straight at him, and then she vanished as if she was ripped backwards into the darkness. But then arms appeared as though they were struggling, trying to break through the window. He ran back inside, leaving the door to the shop wide open. As soon as he got in, he heard crashes of falling things downstairs in the cellar. He ran down the stairs, convinced he was going to tackle a robber. He raced into the kitchen and immediately looked around, but there was no one there. Nothing looked out of place. But then, On the floor below the window where he saw the woman, there was a pitcher and a looking glass, both now broken beyond repair. He looked around the room. He could feel a cold chill. He decided not to tell the women of the house anything about this. Harriet's visions continued on the Sunday. Friends from the church, John and Hannah Rallison, and their landlady, Miss Johnson, visited to lunch with the Favels. Hannah had bonded with Harriet through grief, as a year ago her eldest son had died in a colliery mining accident, and the loss at the time almost consumed her. But during the kitchen meal, Harriet let out a scream and declared she could see a ghost coming down the cellar steps. On this occasion, the apparition displayed bloodstains on its face and neck. Her screams brought John Favell running down the cellar steps, at which point his feet appeared to touch the ghost's head. On running into the room, he looked around, frantically shouting, Where? I don't see it!" Harriet pointed over to the corner of the room and said it disappeared there where it did before, and where she had dreamed about the buried treasure. Everyone immediately left the cellar. The group agreed enough was enough, and on that Sunday afternoon the group went to the meeting at the Mormon Hall of Science, where the Campo Lane ghost was the main topic of conversation. The elders were consulted and a plan was conceived. Now on the way back to the house, the group was now much larger, as it included church elders and some acquaintances wanting to see the suspected ghost. On returning home, the party lit candles, and at 6 p.m. they descended the wooden stairs into the basement, where the church elders had declared the White Lady's aim was to obtain a Christian burial and to bring justice to the criminal if they still lived. The idea of treasure, or the body of a murder victim, lay beneath the floor of the cellar kitchen led John Favell to begin removing flagstones from the floor of the cellar. The story of the apparition had reached the ears of the neighbours, and upon seeing the light coming from the kitchen cellar window and a number of people downstairs watching John remove the floor, a crowd started to gather around the window. On seeing this, the occupants moved upstairs. As midnight approached, the group of 24 people, including Harriet Ward, the Favels, and the Rallisons, were present in the first floor shop. Annoyed by the crowd still growing outside, Mrs. Favell asked her sister to cover the window of the cellar with a blind and 2 forks to pin it up, but the sister stepped back, fearing what she might see on the cellar steps. She hesitated, but as she did, Hannah Rallison took up the blind and said, "Oh, give me the forks," as she snatched them up walking past and headed downstairs, accompanied by her landlady, Mrs. Johnson. She went over to the window, and the crowd, on realising what she was doing, started booing and shouting, and after fixing the blind and pinning it in place with the forks, she turned round to face her friend, Miss Johnson, but until now had treated the whole thing as a joke. She was pale, and she was gasping, oh dear, there's something on the stairs, take me away," and with that she raced up the stairs. When Miss Johnson reached the top, she turned round looking for Hannah, but she was nowhere to be seen. She called her name over and over, "Hannah! Hannah!" A few men rushed over and ran down the stairs to find Hannah unconscious on the cellar floor. They carried her up the stairs and lay her down on the floor in front of the cellar stairs. Hannah slowly regained consciousness, with Harriet kneeling beside her, facing the cellar doorway, and the group stood around them. Hannah quietly said she had seen a female form dressed in white on the stairs, and it slowly made its way towards her. It made no sound, and then suddenly it raced at her and vanished as it rushed past. And then Hannah fainted again, as friends and her husband attempted to revive the unconscious woman. Harriet felt chills on the back of her neck. Looking up, she froze, unable to make a sound. She could see the ghost of the old woman slowly climbing the stairs, and when she reached the top, she stopped, standing in the doorway. The apparition opened its white nightdress to reveal a naked white body, covered in deep gashes with blood flowing from the neck. The figure beckoned for Harriet to follow, and at this, Harriet fainted. Harriet remained insensible for about a quarter of an hour. When she came to, she said the ghost had told her she was called Elizabeth Johnson, murdered by her nephew William Dawson on the 26th of March 1722, and that she'd been buried deep beneath the cellar in a watery grave. The garret and the cellar are now marked with my blood, and you must quit this house, because William Dawson will trouble you if you don't." At this, everyone left the house. Hannah Rallison was moved from the premises in a horse-drawn cab. She was taken by her husband to her home, where she died the following afternoon. At the inquest on the 27th of February, a number of those who were present at the scene in Campo Lane were questioned over and over, but members of the jury could not make anything of this ghost story, and they returned a verdict of death through natural causes. Rallison was described by the coroner as a strong, healthy woman, labouring under no disease as far as known, but he concluded that her death had certainly been caused by fright that she had received on the previous day, up to which time she was perfectly healthy and in good spirits. And on Hannah's death certificate, held by Sheffield City Registry Office, records the cause as sudden death in a fit believed to have been brought on by fright. The death of Hannah Rallison was the final straw for the Favell family. Along with the occupants of 4 neighbouring tenements, they abandoned the haunted building and moved to another rented dwelling nearby. And on the evening of Tuesday, 6th of March 1855, a crowd of 300 people gathered outside the haunted premises on Campo Lane. They completely blocked the road outside, windows were broken, lead was stolen from the roof, and the outhouse was demolished. One group of young men, with the courage fueled by drink, smashed the door and broke into the haunted property. And they made their way to the basement, calling out to the ghost, and they began hauling up the flagstones from the cellar. Pickpockets joined the melee, and after several bystanders were violently robbed, it wasn't long before the police were called for. As they tried to clear the road, the mood of the crowd grew angry, and a street battle erupted, with 2 policemen left badly injured. Afterwards, the press villainised Mormons, and the editors of the Sheffield Free Press and Sheffield and Rotherham Independent declared they did not believe in ghosts, and did not want to see property damaged and law-abiding people robbed or assaulted by those who did. These newspapers were scathing in their criticism of what they called the Campo Lane delusion, and directed most of their blame upon the credulous Mormonites. And on the 17th of March 1855, the Sheffield and Rotherham Independent published what it claimed was a rational explanation for the ghost scare. "We have been informed that some of the alleged appearances have resulted from the operations with a magic lantern by the occupants of the adjacent premises, who knew that Favell and his family were Mormonites, and determined to have a lark at their expense." Well, that'll do it for today, and to let you know, the death of Hannah Rallison remains a key example of death from fright from the 19th century newspaper archive. And Harriet's secret was that after her husband died some years earlier, she claimed to have received frequent visitations from his ghost, and due to this, she converted to spiritualism and had been present during the spirit rappings. Please let me know in the comments below if you believe this story, or if you think it was fake, and if so, how do you think they pulled it off? And there are also many that believe that only a few people are gifted with the power to see ghosts, and that is really why only Harriet could see the old woman. Don't forget, if you're new here, to like and subscribe, as it really helps my channel grow. Well, that'll do it, and take care.